Let's talk a little dry brushing today on Quick Tips. Hi there, Chris here with another quick tip for you all. In this video, we are going to take a look at dry brushing. As the question asks, struggling with dry brushing and feel like previous paint always leaves residue? Do you clean in between paints? Do you have multiple dry brushes on hand? So yes, thank you, Frantic, for the question. And yes, to answer your question, I do have many dry brushes on hand, and it is just from many years of painting and everything like that. For many years, I would only use, like, for example, a older like base coating brush. Now this is an older brush. This is an Artist Opus #1. It's not designed for dry brushing, but this kind of brush in the past would have been relegated to dry brushing once the brush had lost its tip. And that's typical of kind of the way I work, is I don't really throw the brushes in until they're basically worn right down to a nub. And you can see from this brush here, this is an old Citadel brush, and you can see it's got no more hairs. I've worn this thing down to no hairs, and this one basically gets relegated to, you know, doing glue on the bases and that kind of thing. And I still hang on to this brush, and these are really older brushes, and yeah, they're really fun. I like them. I like these kinds of brushes, and I hang on to them for many years. A brush that goes from, you know, doing a very nice sharp point to, you know, being relegated to obviously other duties, grabbing paint, everything like that. It's all part of the process. I have many brushes on hand. So to answer the question, cleaning the brushes between colors, yes, I do. So for example, like this brush here, this is a well-used small Citadel dry brush, and it has been very well used. You can see it's even stained with a lot of color on it. I could probably run this through the soap and pull a little bit more of that out, but otherwise it is very stained. There's no, like, next to no color transference when I dry brush with this brush. I recently picked myself up a brand new one, so this one here will get demolished in the future. These older ones here of Citadels that I have, these are both the medium and small from the previous iteration of Citadel brushes, and you can see that they are very well worn down. And I do prefer having different kinds of dry brushes on hand. For example, this is a small, so for doing, you know, things like belt straps and, you know, the ends of guns, or just anything really small where you just need a light little dry brush, this is the kind of brush I use. And then of course, you know, you get into the medium size for slightly larger surfaces, and then when you get to like tanks and everything like that, you get up to the larger dry brushes. And of course, yes, it all is dependent upon the surface, what I'm painting, what I'm working on, and what kind of overall finish I'm looking for. Typically with dry brushing, it is a very speedy way to accomplish your end goals on a figure. Multiple brushes will help you, and it is very key. So really quickly here, I'm going to demonstrate using the brushes to dry brush. Now, when you're dry brushing, you have a few options, especially if you're on the Citadel side of things. You have the dry paints as well as just using the regular layer paints, base paints, you know, all those other colors. Now, dry brushing with contrast paints is not really ideal, as typically with a lot of the contrast paints, they have a transparency to them, so they are really not ideal, versus colors like this that have a lot of white, where they are going to dry brush on top of darker values and bring some of those lighter values up. And dry brushing doesn't always have to be the end phase in your painting. It doesn't have to be the last thing you do. In fact, it can be early on in your steps. So you lay a base coat down, you dry brush a little, you lay a clear glaze on top of it, and, you know, you continue to mess with the color in that kind of way. So typically with Citadel dries and just regular base paints, or even just layer paints, you can just slap it onto the palette and begin working with it. And there is really no difference between, you know, regular Citadel paints versus the dry paints, because the dry paints are essentially just the paint with very little medium in it, as opposed to, you know, just the regular paints. And everybody's, I'm sure, is very familiar with the regular paints, right? It's just, it flows, it's creamy, it's smooth. And yeah, it's, you know, it's really straightforward here. Let's demonstrate just a little bit. I'm gonna use this older dry brush that has the pink on it. Yeah, we're gonna use this older dry brush. I'm going to grab, you know what, let's use Wraithbone. We don't have to use the Terminus stone. Using dry paints is relatively straightforward. It's not rocket science. So I'm going to grab a little bit of Wraithbone. I'm going to put this on the palette here. And because this brush has a little bit of color on it, I am kind of curious. I usually clean the brushes after each color pass on a figure, so that is something to bear in mind. So I'm just going to quickly grab a little bit of the color here, not too much, wipe most of it off on my cloth. Now when dry brushing, I do wipe it off on the cloth. For myself personally, I use an old t-shirt. As you can see, it's black fabric, and I like using a old black t-shirt because I can see the highlight color. You see it, and I can see how much paint I'm pulling off the bristles really fast. You can just quickly you know, hit the edges. And I do not see any of the previous color transferring. I'm gonna grab a little bit more paint here. I was talking too much. I'm gonna grab a little bit more of this color here. We're just gonna do a little bit of dry brushing. And dry brushing, of course, is, you know, its own thing. It requires a certain level of mastery. You know, don't let others tell you that this is a technique that is only for noobs, and if you're using dry brushing, you're trash at this hobby. Don't fall into that cycle of thought, because it's false. It's a false thing, and dry brushing is a way of accomplishing certain effects very, very quickly. So I've used the light color here, and you can see the bristles don't look quite as bright. I'm going to grab out my brush soap. I like using Masters brush cleaner and preserver. You can see this is very well used. I'm gonna grab a little bit of water. My water is dirty, but that's fine. It's not gonna affect this any. I grab a little amount of water into the bristles, and then I just come into the, oh yeah, you can see there is some color coming out. Yeah, so Chris didn't clean his brush properly, apparently. So I just grab a little bit of soap in my hand, and then I have just a little bit of buildup on the brush itself, and then just really quickly, I just work it in my hand. I do semicircular motions, clockwise, counterclockwise, up and down, left and right. Sometimes change the position of the brush. So like, for example, like with these small dry brushes, they have a slight taper to the furrow, and you can see like how it affects the profile, right? It's kind of elongated. And so with that, I will try and keep the brush in that position, and then do side by side, up and down, counterclockwise, clockwise, and so on and so forth until I'm happy with where it's at. And I do have other videos on brush cleaning for everybody interested in that. Now with this particular brush and color, you can see, yeah, we pulled some of the color out, but yeah, I'd have to be a little bit more aggressive scrubbing just a little bit further down. You can see there's that little band of color on the ends of the bristles. You can see like there's barely any color on those, but you can see there's a little band of color. So a little bit more cleaning would be necessary if I was absolutely worried about color transference, which I normally am. So when you are painting and dry brushing, if you use a darker color before going to your lighter colors, yes, you definitely want to wash between each color, because there can be some transference. You know what? Let's go with an example here. I'm going to grab just really quickly here. I'm going to grab a little bit of Cantor Blue. This is Citadel Air. This is just happened to be on my desk. I'm just going to grab a little bit of this color, slap it onto the palette. I'm going to dry brush something with it, and I'll let you see how the color transference and how important it is to wash and take care of your brushes. Yes, you can dry brush with Citadel Air as well. I'm gonna use this brush here, this small or medium or small dry brush. I'm gonna use this small dry brush. I'm gonna put a little bit of color into the bristles. You can see typically whenever I'm working with this, I do not load the brush very far. Then I head over, wipe the excess off the bristles like so. You can see there's very little there. And then just to show, you know what, let's do the feather here, just because we can just play with that a little bit. And when you're dry brushing, always maintain a light hand, always. And dry brushing, we can go on about dry brushing quite a bit. And if this hasn't been entirely informative for you, let me know. This goes for everybody, not just the frantic who asked the question. But you can see, you can just simply dry brush and pull that color. But now we have this blue in the bristles. So now we're gonna rinse the brush. Okay, I've rinsed the brush, and now we're gonna have a look at it, and you can see most of the color is out. But if I was to jump back in to the bone, I'll bet you we get a little bit of green presence just because of this bone color, which has a little bit of yellow in it. Yeah, I can already kind of see it on the palette. There's gonna be a little bit of color transference, and you can see here how it looks pretty light, right? But I'm gonna go over the bone, and you're gonna see some of the blue pop through. Here, let's go here. Yeah, you can see it already. The blue actually makes the creamy color of the bone color whiter. Some color theory for you all. But yeah, you can see the blue. You can see the blue in it. It actually looks a bit like a blue-gray. It almost looks like I used like, what's that Citadel color? The gray sear. That's what it looks like I used. It looks like I used gray sear, which is kind of funny. But anyway. Yeah, so that is the importance of using brush soap to clean between colors, because you can see how there's just that little spot of blue in there, right? So here, I'm gonna clean the brush off. I'm gonna use some soap, and then I am going to demonstrate it again on that same color. So I'm gonna quickly here grab my brush soap, grab a little bit of water, right? So you can see there's a fairly generous amount of water in the bristles. And then we should, once I start scrubbing this around, yeah, you can kind of see a little bit of lavender there. Yeah. You can see a little bit of lavender because that previous red is mixing with that blue that's on the brush right now. Grab a little bit of the soap, right? Put it in our hand, give it a little scrub, and yeah, you can see the soap color has a slight blue tinge to it. Again, like this is key, and this is what I do every time I'm working up colors when I'm dry brushing. Now, you've probably heard me say it many times in other previous videos regarding dry brushing that typically I do not dry brush more than 2 layers of color up, just because, you know, you can end up just kind of making this really super chalky finish on the model surface. When you are dry brush reliant, your paint finish becomes all the more apparent, and it's very important to make sure you know how to lay down a nice smooth base coat. We wipe that off, dry the brush off, because it's important to, when you're using a dry brush, that the brush is dry, and you can see the bristles look pretty darn good there. Let's grab a little bit of that wraith bone, slap a little bit of this into the bristles, right? Head over, wipe the excess paint off on our cloth. You can see there, not too much. And then we'll do the other side here just so that we can get a bit of a better example, more clearer view of the effect, and we can see the difference, hopefully. Hopefully it shows up on camera. I'm not 100% sure it will, but hopefully it does. Hopefully. Maybe not. Who knows? My luck, it won't. My luck, you guys aren't going to be able to see a darn thing. Yeah. So you can see how the bone looks there, right? As opposed to there. I mean, to my eye, I can see the blue on this side as opposed to this side. This side looks fairly natural, right? The color feels like bone. It's reading like bone. Whereas this side feels, there's a little slight tinge of blue in there. It's an interesting effect, but it's not what I was going for. And so it's an undesired result. And that's where you really need to, you know, take care and clean your brushes. So hopefully Frantic and everybody else out there who has had this question on their brains, yes, hopefully this answers your question. And changing color and washing your brush, I highly recommend it. Use your brush soap. Do you clean in between paints? Yes, I do. Do I have multiple dry brushes on hand? All depends on what I plan to do. If I'm like this size of model here, I would just stick with this one brush as I was working my way around it, you know, completing effects and stuff like that. Versus if I was doing a larger vehicle, monster, or anything like that, then I'd switch to the larger brush. But again, it's entirely situational, and having at least 2 or 3 dry brushes, they don't have to be brand new dry brushes. They can be dirty old dry brushes, or just brushes that are just beat up. They can be brushes that are just beat up and on their last leg. That is fine, because the process of dry brushing beats up your brush, and it is very, very rough on your brush, dry brushing. But yeah, that is it. Hopefully that is answering your question. A big thank you to everybody here. For everybody else out there watching this, hopefully you found this informative as well. Patrons get early access. Sign up for Patreon members. A lot of the fresh tips and just the tip tutorials are also for members only here on the YouTubes. So definitely check it out. And a huge thank you to everybody. Take care of your brushes. They'll take care of you. And I will see you in the next quick tip. Or fresh tip. Maybe just the tip. Who knows? Either way, we're painting. We're painting now. Alrighty, be sure to use this advice, and hopefully it makes you a bit more productive in your paint sessions.